Lesson 79. Let me recognize the problem so it can be solved. What an interesting lesson. We find out that our problem has been solved. We only have one problem. It has already been solved. But since we don't know what our problem is, we cannot recognize that it is solved already. If we base the idea of problems on the world, it seems like there are myriad problems that go on forever, that are to a large extent insoluble and constantly demanding our attention. And in our personal lives, the minute one problem is solved, another seems to pop up. And even if all our problems were solved and we were living a personal life that was problem-free, we would still have the impending problem of death, because that is what the ego bases its existence on, and our belief in the ego on is death and guilt. But we will come back to those huge subjects another day, and right now just focus on how there is only one problem, and if we could recognize what the problem was, then we would realize it's already been solved. There's a very powerful line here. The temptation to regard problems as many is the temptation to keep the problem of separation unsolved. The ego would have us keep the problem of separation unsolved, because if we realize that we are unified in one mind, the ego would evaporate, disappear, not exist. It already does not exist. We just have to become aware of how unreal the ego really is. We're continuing to do 15-minute meditations twice a day, or what the Course might call listenings. We sit for 15 minutes, open our mind, release all judgment as much as we possibly can, and listen for the voice of the Holy Spirit. So you might want to keep a notebook handy for the end of this session. I suggest that during this session we keep it very simple. One problem, one solution. Let's simplify and listen. Get into a comfortable position. No one could solve all the problems the world appears to hold. Dismay and depression are inevitable as you regard them. Some spring up unexpectedly, just as you think you have resolved the previous ones. Others remain unsolved under a cloud of denial and rise to haunt you from time to time, only to be hidden again, but still unsolved. All this complexity is but a desperate attempt not to recognize the problem, and therefore not to let it be resolved. If you could recognize that your only problem is separation, no matter what form it takes, you could accept the answer because you would see its relevance. Perceiving the underlying constancy in all the problems that seem to confront you, you would understand that you have the means to solve them all. And you would use the means because you recognize the problem. Let us ask what the problem is and what is the answer to it. Do not assume you already know. Free your mind of all the many different kinds of problems you think you have. Try to realize you have only one problem which you have failed to recognize. What is the problem? Wait for the answer. What is the solution to this problem? Listen. Did you get your answer? Journal. Write it down. When I asked, what is the problem? I got, there is no problem. And when I asked, what is the answer? For me, the answer was you. You with a capital Y, I was told, the real you. And what I saw was light, just being part of many rays of light. For the shorter practice period today, do it when you need to. You don't have to think about every 15 minutes or anything like that. Our efforts are directed toward recognizing there is only one problem and one answer. In this recognition, are all problems solved? In this recognition, there is peace. So don't be deceived by the form of problems today. Whenever any difficulty seems to arise, tell yourself quickly, let me recognize this problem so it can be solved. Then try to suspend all judgment about what the problem is. If possible, close your eyes for a moment and ask what the problem really is. You will be heard and you will be answered. It would be a good idea to read Chapter 11, Section 8, which is called The Problem and the Answer. Find your way in the text over to Chapter 11, Section 8, and give that a read if you feel inclined. Namaste.